All right, so I muted my audio. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so let's move on. So again, best way to get in touch with me is through Discord. My name on Discord is Doug P. Also in Bookmap Discord, there's an options-Doug chat channel. That's a great place to post questions, comments, and content related to topics to my presentation and the topics of the channel that I'll go through in just a moment. I'm also on X. My name there is at Doug Pless. Want everyone to know that Bookmap is encouraging everyone to join Bookmap Discord. You do need a Bookmap subscription. There is a free subscription available, and you will need to verify your account to fully participate in Bookmap Discord chat and watch the streams on in Bookmap Discord. You can scan the QR code here for more information. Here are the key tenets to my approach of trading. This is the basis of my approach of trading. I believe that options trades and market maker hedging activity are key drivers of price in many stocks and futures. Certainly the large cap tech stocks like the Magnificent Seven stocks, as well as the equity index futures like the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. And for the S&P 500, SPX is the underlying index. SPY is the ETF version of that index, and the ES futures contract is a derivative of SPX. And when traders buy and sell puts and calls in SPX and SPY, market makers take the opposite side of those trades and they hedge their delta exposure with ES futures. And for the NASDAQ 100, NDX is the underlying index. QQQ is the much more liquid ETF version of that index, and the NQ futures contract is a derivative of NDX. And when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of those trades and they hedge their delta exposure with NQ futures. The focus of my presentation today and the focus of the Options-Jug chat channel is options order flow, the impact of options markets on stocks and futures, and the influence of market maker hedging flow on price action. I have a two-step process for trading, and the first is planning, and I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding the expected trading range and volatility for the day, as well as a directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow in Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow in Spotgamma Hero to confirm my thesis and for setups. And when I talk about setups today, I will be focusing on an underlying asset. Setups in that asset can be taken with futures contracts, shares of stock, or options, depending on the asset and the way you like to trade. Questions and comments are welcome, and I will be watching both the Options-Jug chat channel as well as the chat in YouTube for your questions and comments. Please feel free to post. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Here's my agenda for today, Monday, October 7th. First of all, I want to go over news items, economic data, and events for the rest of the week. Nothing really today. Then I'll go through my positional analysis. Then I'll review some setups earlier today, and then I'll take a look at the live market. And when I get to the live market, if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know, and I'll be glad to do that. All right, let's get started with economic data and events for the week. Let's take a quick look at the Spotgamma events calendar. Shown right here. So there's no significant or high impact data or events for the next 2 days. It really begins on Wednesday with the FOMC minutes. Then on Thursday, and that's at 2 p.m. Eastern time, that will be in the middle of my session on Wednesday. So we'll stop whatever we're doing and we'll take a look at the S&P 500 and see if the FOMC minutes do have an impact on the market. That certainly can be the case. Then on Thursday, CPI data comes out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, jobless claims. And then on Friday, PPI data comes out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Then Michigan consumer sentiment at 10 a.m. So the uh, big data releases events really start on Wednesday with the FOMC minutes. All right, so that's the events for the week. Also, there are a number of Fed speakers throughout the week. All right, so that's the data for the week. Let's move on now to um, positional analysis. I'm going to start with the S&P 500, and this is the ES futures and Bookmap. And before I take a closer look at this chart, I do want to take a look at a higher time frame. Oops. I'm going to start with the S&P 500 index, the SPX. That's the underlying index. This is a one-day chart for 1 year, 1 year, one-day chart in Thinkorswim. And I'm going to start with the August 5th low, most recent low, 51.19. Market rallied after that from negative to positive gamma. There was a pullback to the 5,400 put wall, and then another rally, and then consolidation. So let's pick that up now with a 30-day, 1 hour chart. There's that pullback to 5,400, just above. 5,400 was the put wall, and that was actually a test also of this SPY 540 put wall. Consolidation now with SPX trading at a range between around 56.80 and maybe 57.65. All right, let's take a look at levels on this chart now. Squeeze this down just a little bit. All right, so first of all, the dashed purple lines are showing the lower and upper weekly expected move. This is based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from last week, last Friday. These levels remain in place for the entire week. Then the dashed blue lines are showing the lower and upper daily expected move, also based on the options market. It's based again on the closing price for SPX from last Friday. All right, so SPX is trading within both of those ranges. All right, let's take a look at the spot gamma levels on this chart. Oops, I need to zoom down a little bit again. All right, so I'm looking at the spot gamma levels. These are based on gamma weighted open interest. They're levels that are provided to spot gamma subscribers, available on a variety of trading platforms. Again, this is Thinkorswim, a 30-day, 1 hour chart. First level, I'm going to look at the key daily levels. First level is the put wall at 5,500. That's a strike with large net negative gamma that can be expected to act as support. Note that level did move lower from Friday. It was at 5,600 Friday. Now it has moved down to 5,500. All right, the next level up is the volatility trigger. You may not be able to see that level. Actually, let me zoom in just a bit. Try that again. No. All right. So again, put wall 5,500. Some for some reason can't zoom and think or swim. All right. So volatility trigger, that's just above the zero gamma level, and that is at 57.15. That is Spotgamma's proprietary volatility and gamma flip level. Below that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is negative. In a negative gamma environment, market makers have to trade with price edge to the delta exposure. That tends to enhance or increase volatility. Above that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is positive. In a positive gamma environment, like SPX is trading right now, market makers have to trade against price edge to the delta exposure. That tends to subdue or decrease volatility. And that volatility trigger level did move up from Friday, now at 57.15. Then finally, the call wall is at 5,800. That's a strike with the largest net positive gamma that can be expected to act as resistance. That's also the absolute gamma strike. That's a strike with the largest absolute and positive and negative gamma. So that's where most of the gamma weighted open interest is concentrated. And that level did move up from Friday as well. So for SPX, volatility trigger, absolute gamma strike, both move higher. That's bullish. And the put wall move lower, and that's slightly bearish. And then for SPY, the volatility trigger moved up as well. So overall, slightly bullish, shifts higher in levels for the S&P 500. All right, let's wrap up our view of SPX with a 1 minute chart so we can get a closer look at the levels in play for today. There's the volatility trigger. SPX still trading above that level, but looks like it's kind of grinding lower in a positive gamma environment. We'll take a closer look at that in just a minute and see how the options market are having an impact on the price action and volatility today. All right, so that's the S&P 500, SPX. Let's go now back to Bookmap. So Bookmap, remember the SPX 57.15 volatility triggers below, but price is trading below the SPY 572 volatility trigger. And that level acted as resistance earlier today. Now price heading down toward this SPY 570 level, large gamma 2 level, and a very slow grind down. Again, we'll take a closer look at that in just a minute. Oh, now there's the sorry. Now with this move lower, the 57.15 volatility trigger now in play. All right, so I'm showing SPY levels and SPX levels in my own cloud notes. There is a difference in price between ES and SPX. And today it's about, I'm using 48 points the last time I checked. So ES minus SPX is 48. So I'm showing SPX 57.15 at ES 57.63. So SPX 57.15, ES 57.63. And note I do post those index relationships that I'm using every day in Discord. All right, so that is the S&P 500. Let's take a look at NASDAQ. NASDAQ a little bit stronger today. So this is the NQ futures and Bookmap. And let's take a look at the still getting used to using this Mac. So I am on a MacBook Pro. All right, so um, let's take a look at the underlying index charts for NASDAQ. I'm going to start with QQQ, trading at a very narrow range today. Support at the 485 volatility trigger. And then making a series of lower highs with these two levels. That's a 485.91. That's a combo one level. So very important combo level combining NDX and QQQ, open interest, gamma weighted open interest into one level there in terms of a QQQ price. And just above that is the zero gamma level at 486. So we're overall very narrow range for QQQ today. And then finally, let's take a look at NDX. NDX 20,000 on the upside, and then this 19,000 19,901 level acting as support. All right, back to Bookmap. So again, I have my own cloud notes. There's that NDX 20,000 level, and then the 19,901 combo 4 level that acted as support. And then here's the QQQ large gamma 2 volatility trigger that has also acted as support multiple times today. All right, so both the S&P 500 and NASDAQ trading at very narrow range today. Let me see if I can check for questions on YouTube. Let me see if I can get to that. All right, no questions on YouTube. Okay, let's wrap up positional analysis. In the past, I have taken a look at gamma notional at the beginning of the day and also the Vanna model in a negative gamma environment. I'm going to switch that up now, and I'm going to look at more real-time data. What this chart is showing, this is the trace tool that's available to Spotgamma subscribers. There are 3 heat maps on this chart. I'm looking at gamma, so this is gamma notional right now. And what this chart is showing, this blue zone, and let me zoom back a little bit so we can take a look at earlier in the day. Let's go back to about 10 o'clock, and then we'll step through the day. A couple things to take a note of. First, this blue zone, this is positive notional gamma. That's also confirmed by the blue bars over here, positive notional gamma. This means that in this case, again, positive gamma assumes that traders of short calls, market makers of long calls, since the positive gamma, they have to trade against price. This tends to contain price. And let's say there is some negative gamma down here. So if price did start to move lower, presumably it would move quicker through this negative gamma zone. Here you can see the red bars there, indicating that traders in this area are long puts, market makers are short puts. Hits the negative gamma, they have to trade with price to hedge their delta exposure. So we're looking for kind of slow, sticky movement in this range of positive gamma in the blue zone and faster movement, more volatility in the red zones. So mostly blue zone today, price trading in a very narrow range. One other thing to take a look at is the stability indicator right here. And this is on the high side. So the higher the stability indicator, the less movement, less volatility. Uh, that's what we're looking for. Lower volatility, smaller trading range with a higher stability index. All right, so this is real time. Again, in the past, I've looked at gamma notes from the beginning of the day. Now looking at real time data. So I'm going to step through the day. Now the stability indicator gets up to 80%. So that's pretty high in a very blue zone. Positive gamma. So this definitely helps to explain the very narrow trading range today. Something very important to keep an eye on. So there's 12:30, 1 p.m. Let's go to real time. And stability indicator has dropped down just a little bit, but the S&P 500 trading in again, a very narrow range in a very positive gamma region. So this makes, in my mind, for me, directional trading a little bit more difficult, but a great day to put on an iron condor or some uh, a zero DTE iron condor, something like that that takes advantage of this narrow trading range. Note also the very positive gamma now that has built in at 5710. You can also look at the 60 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. So that positive gamma is building at 5710. All right, let's take a look. So based on this, again, you're looking for a very narrow trading range, not much of directional volatility. All right, let's move on now to this delta pressure. So this red zone up above, that is selling pressure. That's where market makers need to sell futures, sell stock to hedge their delta exposure. And the blue zone below is buying pressure. That's where market makers would need to buy stock, buy futures to hedge their delta exposure. Also, this purple line here, there are two choices. You can use the heroes, that's the hero signal, and you can use the S&P equities or the S&P 500, and I'm using the S&P equities. We'll take a look at hero in just a minute. There's a pretty big discrepancy between the equities and the index right now. Maybe that could be helping to contain the S&P 500. Let's go back to the equity signal. All right, so notice also how the S&P 500 is trading mostly in this black zone in between. So kind of the path of least resistance. That's what Spotgamma calls it. Path of least resistance, where there's no real selling pressure or buying pressure. And finally, let's take a look at Hero. And then we'll get back to Bookmap for setups. And again, one nice way to trade this is this positive gamma environment. Sell an iron condor, some range bound trade that takes advantage of the narrow range. All right, so now moving on to real-time data. This is the hero signal. Hedging impact real-time options. This is available to Spotgamma subscribers, starting with the S&P 500. Again, this is the hero signal. Hedging impact real-time options. What this chart is showing is options trades and market maker hedging activity for a combined signal of SPX, SPY, XSP, and ES futures. There are two lines on this chart. This is the hero signal, and this is the price line for SPX. A falling hero signal indicates traders are taking negative delta options position. They are buying puts and or selling calls. A rising hero signal indicates traders are taking positive delta positions. They're buying calls and or selling puts. And remember, market makers take the opposite side of those trades. So they have to buy and sell, in this case, ES futures to hedge their delta exposure. All right, so that's the first signal that we can take a look at for the S&P 500, and it is bearish for the day. Delta notional value for the index signal, minus 2.4 billion today. All right, so there's another signal that we can take a look at. This is the equity signal. What this is showing is options trades and market maker hedging activity for all 500 stocks in the S&P 500 index. Very different picture than the index signal. And this is positive notional value for the day, showing that traders are buying calls, selling puts in the S&P 500 stocks. All right, let's go take a look at Bookmap now. Go back to ES. So it looks like the index signal is really having more of an influence on the S&P 500 today. So looking at a short, if you wanted to trade that way, that would be good for about a 20-point plus move lower, right around 57.88, down below, heading toward the SPX 5715 volatility trigger at 5763, ES 5763. The volume dots in Bookmap are showing market buy minus sell. Green volume dots indicate more buyers than sellers. Magenta dots, more sellers than buyers. You can see on every move higher, the buyers are exhausted. Sellers start to come in. Buyers are exhausted, small volume dots. Aggressive sellers start to come in. Price moves lower, makes series of lower highs. Again, aggressive sellers come in. And this time there were really hardly any buyers. And you can see in the cumulative volume delta, that's a dark blue line in the subchart, starting to move lower. And not really getting much help from stops in icebergs. Stops shown by the yellow line in the subchart. And iceberg orders, they are negative for the day. So large traders selling with iceberg orders, they use to hide their size. So kind of a gradual rollover there in the S&P 500. Let's go back to Hero. Let's go back to the index signal, again, which seems to have a stronger influence today. Go to full screen. So let's take a closer look at this. Let's go to puts and calls. I'm going to have to jump back to avoid the auto zoom. So again, the index signal having a stronger influence today. So what this is showing is traders have been buying puts since the open. Initially, up until about 10:15, they were buying calls, and the call signal makes a peak there, starts to move lower, then gradually moving lower. So this call peak is something to look for. Flow alert comes in just a few minutes after the call peak, gets your attention, signaling significant options activity, and price starts to grind lower as traders continue to buy puts and stop buying calls, start selling calls. So you can compare the notional value here. It's the put buyers at minus 3 billion versus call buyers, still positive at around 148 million. So again, the signal had the greatest influence on the S&P 500 today is put buyers. As SPX heads down toward the 5715, it's called hedge wall. There's the volatility trigger for an index. Let's go back to Bookmap. So again, the S&P 500 now heading down toward the 5715 volatility trigger. We'll keep a close eye on the S&P 500 as it heads down to that level and see how price reacts at the 5715 volatility trigger. All right, I'm just checking for questions on YouTube. No questions. All right, let's check NASDAQ. And again, we'll keep a close eye on this as price heads down toward the volatility trigger. A lot of aggressive sellers in there and also put buyers in the index. Go to NASDAQ. So NASDAQ starting to break down now below the 485 volatility trigger for QQQ. NASDAQ has also been making a series of lower highs. And let's go go back to Hero. So just like the S&P 500, there are two signals that we can take a look at. First, the index signal for NASDAQ. What this chart is showing is options trades market maker hedging activity for a combined signal of NDX and QQQ. There's another signal that we can take a look at for the NASDAQ. That's the Mag 7 signal. What this chart is showing is options trades and market maker hedging activity for the stocks known as the Magnificent Seven: Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla. Very similar to the S&P equity signal, or you could say the SB equity signal is similar to the Mag 7 signal. It's often the Mag 7 plus 493. All right, let's go back to the NASDAQ signal. Again, put buyers little bit more aggressive than the call buyers, and they started buying puts just right around 938. So in here, let's check the Mag 7 signal. All right, so mixed signals for the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. There's also a call peak here, right around 10:15, same time as the S&P 500, as traders continue to buy puts. So at that time, both the blue line and the orange line were moving in the same direction and prices moving lower. All right, so that's right around 10:15. Go back to Bookmap. So the high of the day was right around 10:30. NASDAQ started to make a series of lower highs as traders were buying index puts. So just like the S&P 500 ES futures, buyers are exhausted, aggressive sellers start to come in, cumulative volume delta starts to drop, and price grinds lower, making a series of lower highs. Let's check NASDAQ, see S&P 500. So it's still holding above the volatility trigger. All right, let's take a look at some stocks. First stock I want to take a look at is Amazon. Let's see what options traders have been doing in Amazon. It's a little bit easier read in single stocks today. What this chart is showing is pretty much from the open, traders were selling calls and buying puts for the first half hour, 9:30 to 10 o'clock. Then they started selling puts and buying calls. Price reversed higher a little bit and now consolidating. Let's go take a look at Bookmap. Here's that quick move lower as traders were buying puts and selling calls, move higher as they switch and start buying calls and selling puts. Then consolidation now below VWAP. So you can also see the cumulative volume delta pretty closely aligned with price. Traders, aggressive sellers on the way down, a few buyers. Now cumulative volume delta consolidating also. All right, next stock I want to take a look at is Google. Let's see what options traders are doing. Back to Hero. Go to Google. All right, initially traders were selling calls, buying puts. Looks like a put seller came in. Let me zoom in on that just a little bit. Orange falling orange line. Traders selling calls, market makers buy the calls. They have to sell stock to hedge the delta exposure. And the put line really started to move higher, lower, right around 950. Price tried to recover and then started moving lower. This vertical line is a large block order, institutional order. Someone selling puts, then the put buyers immediately came in. Go to Bookmap. So Google's trading below VWAP all day. There's that initial move lower. Pull back to 167 just below VWAP. That's a light blue line. Very steady mechanical move lower. And note 165 is the key gamma strike hedge wall. Looks like price has breached that level. And there it is, the 165. So Google has breached that level. Set for questions. All right, next stock I want to take a look at is Meta. Very bearish day here in Meta. Note 600 is the call wall key gamma strike. There were a lot of aggressive buyers shown by the large green volume dots. And then that started to taper off, stay around 1045. You can see the cumulative volume delta rising sharply, then starting to level off. Let's see what options traders are doing today. Go to Meta, zoom in just a bit. So they were probably for the first 5 minutes not doing much. Call sellers came in right around 935. A few minutes later, they start buying puts. Flow alert comes in just after the breach of the 600 call wall key gamma strike, signaling significant options activity. Again, as traders are buying puts and selling calls. Very nice short setup in Meta today as traders continue to buy puts and sell calls. Like the Bookmap, and Meta continues to grind lower. It looks like now some aggressive sellers are coming in with that break below 590. Any questions so far? Let's take a look at NVIDIA. And just the opposite for NVIDIA today. A lot of call buyers moving price higher. NVIDIA, back. For NVIDIA, 125 is the key gamma strike. That was kind of the launching point today. And the 130 is the call wall. Opening print right around 125. Key gamma strike. Nice pullback entries as price moves above VWAP. Heads toward the very obvious liquidity targets, primarily at 130 call wall, also at 129, 128. This is very typical of a stock. These are limit sell orders shown in the Bookmap heat map here. That's a history of the limit orders in the order book. Very typical for stock. These orders come in at the 9:30 cash open. They stay in place until they're filled. So this high liquidity attracting price as traders buy calls and aggressive buyers buy NVIDIA, helping to move it up to 130 today, 130 call wall. Let's see what options traders are doing in NVIDIA. And you can see the rising orange line showing traders have been buying calls all day. Up until about 2 o'clock, they continue to buy calls. So when traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, and they have to buy stock to hedge their delta exposure. Note the slight breach of the call wall, and just a couple of minutes after that, the call buyers take the foot off the gas, start selling calls. Blue line pretty flat today. Notional value only 39 million, so they are selling puts today. But call buyers definitely driving price. And this is something you really want to look for. This makes it very easy to buy a stock. This is a very easy trade today, very easy long as traders are buying calls. Like the Bookmap. It's a very nice long setup in NVIDIA today. Let's take a look at Tesla. Short setup in Tesla. And for Tesla, 250 is the call wall key gamma strike. Let's see what options traders have been doing in Tesla. I'm going to shift to the total signal. When I was looking at Tesla earlier today, it was easier to take a look at the total signal. Zoom in on this just a little bit. So there's the 250 call wall key gamma strike. Hero signal has been pretty choppy today, but price corresponding pretty nicely up until about 10:45. Looks like a lot of block orders coming in, mostly bullish, large institutional orders. Let's go to Bookmap. I'm going to go back to Hero. All right, so the best trade in Tesla today were these, the two move legs lower. Zoom in on that just a little bit. Here and here, as traders were taking negative delta positions. So 940 and 1020. Go back to Bookmap. There's that first pullback to VWAP, first short setup down to the high liquidity at 245. Next pullback above VWAP. You can see the Aggressive buyers are exhausted. Sellers come in, price moves down, goes through the liquidity targets at 245, 244, and 243. All right, any questions so far? All right, let's go back. Let's check on S&P 500, see how it's doing at the volatility trigger. So holding just above the 57.15 volatility trigger. Let's go back and check Hero. We'll check the index signal first. Go back to puts and calls. Back to total signal. So continues to chop. Let's check the equity signal. Equity signal was moving higher up until just before noon. They took the foot off the gas, and then price really started to move lower once they took the foot off the gas. Go back to the index signal. Overall continues to grind lower, making a series of lower highs and lower lows. Let's go back and check trace. So according to the delta pressure, S&P 500 is still in somewhat of a neutral zone, black zone, in between buying pressure below and selling pressure above, maybe approaching buying pressure if it does breach below the hedge wall uh, volatility trigger. Back to Bookmap. All right, does anyone have any stocks they want me to take a look at? And Vihan, welcome, glad you're here. All right, questions, comments, stocks you want me to take a look at? Let's take a look at one other thing in trace. I want to take a look at charm pressure. This is something you want to take a look at the end of the day. Look for potential pinning levels between the selling pressure or between the red and the blue. Looks like a big drop lower now. Let's go back to Bookmap. Oh, yeah. There must have been some news. Quick drop below volatility trigger down to 5,700. That 5,700 level was noted as support in the Spotgamma AM founders note. Looks like so far today it did its job. Sellers become exhausted. Now some aggressive buyers starting to come in, trying to recover the volatility trigger. All right, so the S&P 500 now trading below the SPY volatility trigger at 572 and the SPX volatility trigger at 5715. All right, last call for questions or stocks. All right, everyone, I want to thank you very much for watching. Thanks for your questions and comments. Sorry about the technical issues at the start. I think I have them worked out now. I'm trying to use my iPad as a second screen. I think things got um, twisted around a little bit, but I think we're good to go now. So again, everyone, thank you very much for watching. Thanks for your questions and comments. Remember, Wednesday, 2 p.m., FOMC minutes that will be in the middle of my session, and we'll watch the S&P 500 and NASDAQ closely at that time. All right, everyone, thanks again, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.